Hi everybody, my name is Liz Marchio and I am the Citizen Science Coordinator at Barataria Preserve, which is the preserve unit of Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve, which is located in New Orleans, Louisiana. Barataria Preserve is about 30 minutes south of New Orleans in Marrero, Louisiana, and if you're familiar with Louisiana, south of New Orleans is just like you see here. Lots of bayou, lots of water. So what I do at the preserve is that I'm the coordinator for science activities for kids and adults, and I do education via videos and in person. So what we're going to talk about today in this video specifically is what we do here at the preserve to preserve it. A preserve is a type of national park that can be used by people, so you're allowed to hunt and fish here with a license. But you cannot do negative things that affect the preserve, like graffiti or building things or harming it. It is a usable national park, which makes it very important because not all national parks you can hunt or fish in. So a preserve is a little bit different. Also in the preserve, we try to preserve it for future generations. Now how we do that is multiple different ways. One, we want to make sure that we maintain the historical, cultural, and natural beauty of this place so that the next generation can have the same experience. In order to do that, we have to monitor species in the park. Monitoring species can be going out and counting them, assessing the health of them, and it can also be monitoring them to see what the interactions between the species are. One of the interactions we found to be negative is water hyacinth. This species is a non-native species, which means that it doesn't come from this area originally. It was brought in as an ornamental species, and it has become so good at growing in southeastern Louisiana that we upgraded it from just non-native, meaning it exists here, but we aren't concerned about it. We upgraded it to invasive, which means all those things, except on top of that, it's really, really good at reproducing in the area, and it's taking over and causing problems that are economic. Specifically, that's kind of what we pay attention to because it has to do with money. So these plants outcompete other organisms in the area, which cause economic issues. So we want to try to control invasive species so they don't harm us economically, but also don't harm the species here. Because remember, preserve, we're trying to preserve the species that are from this area and belong here. We don't want these to go crazy and lose some of the other species here that are iconic and what made it a national park to begin with. So control methods for water hyacinth take around 3 different ways of doing it. You can control these plants with herbicide, which is a chemical. You put it in the water, put it on the plant dies. That's not ideal because you're using chemicals and these plants are aquatic, so you're putting chemicals in or near the water. Another way of controlling these plants, which is much more difficult but much better for the environment, is mechanical control. Mechanical control is just what I did here. I pulled the plants up out of the water where their habitat is, put them on land where they do not like it because they're aquatic. They will dry out and they will not live. And then I can use these also as compost. That's mechanical control. We also use biocontrol. So one of the issues with invasive species is that when they get loose in areas where they are not native to, there's no predators because they've been put in a completely new area. All their competitors that existed in the Amazon where these are from don't exist here. So they can go crazy and repopulate and go crazy population-wise. Biocontrol basically introduces a species that's found in the native habitat of this plant and uses it to control the reproduction of this species. Particularly, beetles have been used for biocontrol with water hyacinth. Supposedly they are very specific eaters, so they only eat water hyacinth. So we've released them here at the preserve to help control this species, and so far it's been doing fairly well. You can see on the leaves that has some scarring, that brown splotching. Those are places where the beetle has punctured the leaf and sucked out the chlorophyll. And if you're familiar with what chlorophyll does for a plant, helps the plant get energy and grow. So the biocontrol, at least for water hyacinth, it reduces the energy amount the plant can get from the area, and it doesn't reproduce nearly as well. Since you're relying on the beetles to reduce the population number of water hyacinth, using biocontrol is a more longer-term control method. What we use here at Barataria, we do not use chemical control. We've used mechanical control and biocontrol. If you want to see what chemical control looks like, you can take a look at City Park. They have a terrible water hyacinth problem there, and it's so bad that they've had to use herbicides to get rid of it. So all methods are viable to use for invasive species, specifically plants, but there's some that are better than others. So why is this plant so good here? Why does it do so well in southeastern Louisiana? Well, it has multiple adaptations that make it, that enable it to really do superbly in an aquatic environment with slow-moving water and warm climate. So this plant is aquatic. It only grows in or near water where the roots are submerged. It likes to have its feet wet. So you're not going to find this plant in a field. You're not going to find it in the city. You're going to find it in the swampy areas. You could find it in a pond if someone put it in a pond for some reason. But they're mainly adapted to aquatic environments. Also, they are able to float. So this plant, maybe not this individual in particular, but this species is able to float really well on top of the water. The way that they are able to do that is that inside the leaf structure, here's a leaf. You can see how the stem of the leaf, which is called the petiole, see how fat it is right there? That's not abnormal. That's completely normal for this plant. There's nothing wrong with it. It grows that a little bit chunky petiole because these stems have a spongy material inside and lots of air, so they are able to float. Now when this petiole gets really bulbous like this, you can see it compared to the straighter one. This is an indicator that the plant has been free floating for some time, so it just floats in the middle of the water and just floats along and goes with the flow. Now, if this plant were to, if this individual plant were to get stuck near the margins of the water, up by the sides where it's shallow, these big root systems can reach the soil. You can see the soil on the roots here. And they will start to root into the soil. And what happens is that the leaves then, the petioles grow really tall and long and skinny. Because if they're on the margins where the water is shallow, they don't need to float anymore. They just need to grow taller so they can outcompete some shorter plants. Now when they grow more in the middle of the water, you can see the difference. They grow a little shorter, the petioles are much chunkier and fatter, and the lamella is still basically the same, a little bit smaller. So you can see that depending on where they grow in the water will depend on the growth. But these are the same species, they just have different growth patterns because they've grown in different areas of the bayou. So another adaptation for these plants is the way they reproduce. These plants can reproduce sexually by growing seeds. They can also reproduce asexually, meaning they don't need a partner to reproduce. Sexual reproduction means that there has to be male and females that get together, and this can be problematic if the populations are really small. Maybe that there are a few individuals, and then sexual reproduction, it makes it more challenging to make a new generation. Asexual reproduction means that you don't have to have a partner. It means that you can essentially clone yourself and create the next generation that way without anybody else's help. So these plants are able to do both. They can asexually reproduce and create daughter plants. They can also create seeds and sexually reproduce. The interesting thing about the seeds is another adaptation is that they're extremely long-lived. They can remain dormant for up to 28 years. 28 years. So it's a great adaptation for this plant to do really well, but if it's in a place where we don't want it and it's reproducing sexually, creating seeds that last for 28 years, and they're in the bottom of the bayou, things become a little bit more challenging for control. Great for the plant, not so great when we don't want the plant around. So when it asexually reproduces and it buds off, it doesn't just, bud off something into the wind. It actually shoots out a stolon, which is, here's one here. You can see it's brown, so it doesn't look like the petiole of the leaf. The stolon essentially creates another baby plant or a daughter plant. This then is called a mother plant. So the stolon pops off a little baby plant, and the stolon there can be multiple stolon on the same individual plant. This one has one, but I've seen 3 or 4. So instead of just a chain of plants growing and growing and growing, you get a whole mat of plants growing. So it's a great adaptation for the plant because then it can use all of the daughter plants to help keep it buoyant and float along as a big group. That also helps reduce predation because instead of just one plant for an organism to go after, there's multiple plants for the predator to choose from, which reduces the impact on each individual plant. So lots of adaptations that make water hyacinth do super well in southeastern Louisiana. Next, we're going to go in and do a dissection of the plant just so we can see in detail all the little interesting aspects, and we're going to name some anatomy. And then I want you to pay attention to the anatomical structures and the adaptations, because the activity for this video will be to draw your own water hyacinth and name the different anatomical parts and what they do. Okay? Pretty simple, pretty easy, lots of fun. Hey everybody, now we're in the science lab, and in the science lab we get to do cool stuff like do dissections. So what I did is I brought in water hyacinth as well as some other plants so we can take a look at the different structures. So here's our water hyacinth. I collected some different specimens so that we can take a look at the structures. Specifically, I found some with really bulbous petioles and some longer petioles. We can take a look at the differences. I also brought in some other plants. So this is a red maple. You can see these are the leaves of the plant. This is called lizard's tail. It has a white bloom. It looks like the lizard's tail. These are the leaves of that plant. This is Chinese tallow, an invasive species. So we'll take a look at those leaves. And this is taro, which is a marginal aquatic plant. Looks like an elephant ear. Sometimes that's what they're called. So this is the leaf. Well, this whole thing is the leaf, and we'll go over the different structures. So as I said before, one of the adaptations of water hyacinth to living in aquatic environments is that the leaf structure has a buoyancy to it. So we're going to dissect one of the leaves here. We'll go ahead and take one of the longer ones. So we got the lamella, which is the flattened part of the leaf that captures the most of the sun and most of the energy. It usually has a lot of the chlorophyll. In water hyacinth, the stolon, or the stem of the leaf, also is green, which indicates it has chlorophyll in it. So lamella, petiole. Here is red maple. lamella, looks like a star. It's where it captures all the energy. It's green, so it photosynthesizes. The petiole on this one is a little bit green. A lot of times these are red, hence red maple. So this is the petiole, or the stem of the leaf. You can see the difference. Then we have our lizard's tail. Break a leaf off. Lamella, remember, captures the light, lots of green. Petiole, this one is sort of green, but you can see it's not nearly as green. So a lot of photosynthesis up here for lizard's tail, not so much on the petiole. And you can notice that the petiole looks like a stem. It's hard and has no adaptive structure like the water hyacinth. We got Chinese tallow, lamella, petiole. You can see these three kind of look similar. The petiole looks very similar. It's like a stem, very stem-like. Water hyacinth, a little bit different. The petiole has an adaptive structure inside. If we break it open, probably get scissors. You can see all the little air pockets. You can hear it crunching. That's where the air pockets are. So we're going to take a look at water hyacinth's leaf structure. So here we have a mother plant. You can tell it's a little bit bigger. It has a stolon, which I just broke off. It's fairly sturdy, but it can snap very easily. So here's the stolon. The reproductive, it's not really reproductive structure, I guess, but it helps the reproduction. So this is where the stolon goes from the mother plant to the baby plant, and you get a new plant. And then eventually the baby plant or daughter plant will create stolons of their own and create daughter plants. Just keep going. So this water hyacinth specimen is quite interesting because it has longer petioles and also shorter, fatter ones. The short, fat ones are usually indicators that the plant had been free floating in the water because it needs lots of buoyancy, and when all those air pockets are condensed down into this little bulbous form, it's very buoyant. These, looks like the plant had been towards the margins after some time because the new growth comes from the center. So the old growth is very bulbous and floaty. The new growth is very long and tall, which means it probably hit the soil, started growing into the soil with the roots, didn't really need to grow these bulbous forms anymore. So we take one of the bulbous forms off. Oh, this one has a lot of water inside. It's been waterlogged. So you can hear the water inside. You can also see that these leaves are pointing down, which means that they've probably been submerged for some time. So here's another one of the bulbous leaves. See all that water coming out? That's because all the little structures in there that help keep it buoyant got waterlogged. Here's another one. It's kind of cathartic popping these. Oh, ugh. So if we did that to one of these taller ones, not nearly as much water in there, right? So it's a good indicator of what we're telling you is accurate, that these bulbs have a lot of space in there for air. Look, pretty cool. So we got leaf, lamella, flattened part, lots of chlorophyll. The stem of the leaf, or the petiole. We got the roots, help collect nutrients from the water, help give it support and sturdiness. The stolon, which is where the daughter plants bud off of the mother plant. And there you go. It's pretty fun to pull these plants apart. So if you go to a body of water, you find some water hyacinth and you're curious about it, feel free to pull some up, take a look. They are very prolific, so you really don't have to worry about harming their populations. And we really prefer their populations to be lower anyways. So hope you learned something.
go outside, explore for yourself, and let us know. Bye, y'all.